What I mean when I specify a part of the body is that when we suppress an emotion and don't deal with it and process it and understand why it occurred and then choose a healthier thought instead, the old emotion gets stuck somewhere in our body. And this is actually a physical thing, and it can cause disease, and it can cause discomfort, and it can cause us a lot of angst, anxiousness. It can cause us all kinds of things. And so when I say that something is a heart emotion, that means that the tendency of that feeling, when it goes unresolved, is for it to stick around in the actual location, organ, tissues of our heart. So an example that a lot of people know of would be that the liver stores anger. And when we're angry, we actually create a toxic liver, okay? And the gallbladder is gall, you know, bitterness. Won't let you watch on the iPad. If anybody on their iPhone is also not seeing the video, would you shoot a comment? Just because I don't know how that works on the iPad, so I don't know if that means it's not working at all. Anyway, that is what I mean when I say a heart emotion, is that it's a feeling that will actually stash itself when it's not dealt with, like toxins that are affecting your heart. And if you think, awesome, thanks. If you think about that, it's, you know, might help us understand why people's bodies are so individual and respond to things differently, and there's not really such a thing as a bullet cure that just fixes things for everybody, because we are such individual people, and the chemistry of how our body is working is very complicated. Okay, not great connection. So is it cutting out a lot? I also know that there's like a long delay with the Facebook Live videos where there's probably already a comment that I can't see. It's kind of funny how that works. I'm not sure why it's so delayed. Anyway, okay. Great. Awesome. I know last time I was somewhere that I thought I had great connection, and it on the recording later was like totally cutting out at certain places with the volume, so I don't know what causes that. Okay, so today we're talking about the oil of Aroma Life, and I'm curious, like, if anybody has used this and noticed physical benefit from using it, because it'll be interesting as you start working with the emotions related to this oil. If you might see that the physical symptoms it helped you with had to do with emotions that it was releasing for you. Okay, so for example, I'm trying to think if there's a compliant way for me to say this. I used to struggle with restlessness at night when most people sleep. A lot of restlessness. And I scanned for orange one time and began to experience less restlessness. But it wasn't because orange is a cure for a sleep problem, okay? That's not why. It was because of the emotional issues. Okay, now it's telling me my connection is weak. That's really sad. It's like, your connection is weak. Okay, maybe I'll move around and see if this gets any better. Anyway, the orange was not the cure for what was going on because of some physical property that it had, okay, or some medical property that it had. What was going on is I was having crazy emotional imbalance, and then the orange helped me to release those things and to become aware of the things that were making me so restless at night, okay, what I was losing my rest over. So anyway, I say that just because if you've had some cool results with Aroma Life, this might be a good time to start looking at that type of connection between oils that you've used for physical things and why they have helped to resolve an issue. So the emotion that goes with Aroma Life for today, it can help with more than one emotion, but for the sake of the newsletter and all that, I picked aloneness. And aloneness and loneliness are separate emotions in releasing emotional patterns, but I sort of honestly just kind of interchange those words and even interchange the oils for those things when I work on them. It's, you know, it's not like this exact, if I don't have every single oil and releasing emotional patterns, I can never work on my emotional health. I used to do that a little bit, and then finally one day I was like, that's not gonna work. There's a lot of oils in here. I don't even know what some of these are. So I started just kind of loosening up the obsessiveness with it having to be exact, and I would look for a blend that had a similar oil in it, or if it was, I'm trying to think of an example of that. Like, let's say you don't have cinnamon. I've used thieves when I didn't have cinnamon with me to release one of the emotions with cinnamon, if that makes sense. So if you have that book, just understand, like, sometimes I'm not being exact when I talk about, like, I'm gonna refer to this as loneliness too, but there is another entry for loneliness in the book. So anyway, what I would like to say about aloneness is probably something that is hard to hear when you're really struggling with loneliness. I know, because used to, when people said this to me, or when I would hear somebody talk about this or teach on this, it would really be hard for me to hear, because I was in the middle of a lot of loneliness, just this feeling that I couldn't seem to shake, and that was really affecting me in my life. And so I want you to understand that I know what it feels like, and I'm hoping that by truly, like through experience, validating that what you feel is real, that this won't be something that makes you feel like I don't understand, or that I must be talking about something other than what you're dealing with, okay? Loneliness and aloneness are an illusion. They're not real. They're not our reality. They're something that tries to steal from us and convince us they're our reality, but they really are not substantial. They're a lie, okay? So for most people, this example makes sense. I know there are people that literally everyone in their life turns on them, but for most of us, that illusion of being alone and isolated and all of that, it has to, like, think about, is there actually, you know, in that moment, is every single person that you love against you? Is there nobody to tell you that they love you? Is there nobody to embrace you? Or is what's going on something different, okay? And it's about not feeling heard, and not feeling understood, and not feeling validated, and feeling like nobody understands the specifics of what's going on, okay? So one tool, the first tool for aloneness and loneliness, and also kind of branching into the realm of isolation, is that we need to tell people what it is we need them to validate. So my husband and I recently went through an exercise for this where I'd never really thought of doing this, but someone was teaching this class, and they gave us a script for it. I think I talked about this before. And you walk through and you tell your spouse, like, I don't feel validated with this concern. And it's good to start with something that isn't like, well, you should never say it's your fault, but we started with something totally unrelated to like a between us misunderstanding. It was another situation. And I was like, you know, I just need to feel validated that you can understand why I would feel this way and why I would be discouraged in this way. And I knew that he understood, right? And he's very understanding. I knew he wasn't totally oblivious to the fact that my concern was valid, or unwilling to acknowledge that I felt that way. But for some reason, when he said, I completely understand. And then in this case, he was able to say, I felt like that too. And when he said that, I was like, oh, I'm good. I feel a lot better. It was crazy. I just moved on so quickly, understanding that I was validated. So if you struggle with loneliness and aloneness, talk to somebody, and maybe even kind of prep with this idea of like, let's talk and help each other validate that we are not crazy for what we're going through, and identify with each other. Like, even if you can't identify with the exact thing someone's going through, you can start looking for ways to relate to it that are, you know, somewhat close in proximity, and just kind of say, you know what, I've been through some things like this too, and I can really see how you would feel like that. And as you start talking and thinking about it, you might even realize that you have felt exactly like that. And it's very powerful when someone has felt almost exactly what we're feeling and could say, whoa, yeah, I have felt like that. just amazing how that can help us let go. But the other thing is that we will tend to feel alone, lonely, and isolated when we, I don't want to say when stress, like, attacks us, because we need to be in charge of how we deal with stress, but when stressful things happen and we haven't processed yet, physical stress, meaning like our circumstances and the things around us, that take all of our attention and start like zapping our energy and kind of getting us focused on what's wrong, okay? That kind of stress puts us in this mode where we start disconnecting from the spiritual. It distracts us from spiritual awareness. A lot of people that I've talked to and shared with about this, they'll say, yeah, when certain kinds of stress and certain things that come at me, I'll just get to this place where it's like, I cannot pray right now. Like, I just can't connect. Or God just feels so far away. I know exactly what that feels like. So here's another little validation. I felt like that so many times. I spent a chunk of my life not that long ago feeling like God is so far away and He can't hear me. And that was a lie. I wish I hadn't believed it for as long as I did. But now that I've been through believing it and like been on the other side of it, it's like I have extra joy because I know what that felt like to not know that He was as close as the air that I breathed. It was all an illusion. It was fake. And I watched The Matrix for the first time last week. And today when I was thinking about Aroma Life, I was like, that's what this is like. It's like we think we're all alone, and then we wake up into another reality and realize, like in that case, there's people like watching, anticipating, like there's purpose on us, and people are like, they're the one. Not people, but like God, the angels, like watching us, waiting for us to fulfill our destiny. And there's all this anticipation around the incredible life and destiny that God created in every single one of us, but we're asleep. And we think we're alone when there's thousands, like hosts of thousands surrounding our lives. Okay, so that's what I mean, is it's an illusion, it's not real, and it takes choosing to turn back into relationship and being aware of the spiritual, because we are spiritual, physical, and mental and emotional, all those things. We are body, soul, and spirit. And when our soul gets upset and distressed, it likes to take charge. But our soul makes a better servant than master. Our spirit needs to be the master. And so when your soul starts taking over and saying, woe is me, and I talked about this in my last video, I think something strange and unusual is happening to me. What we have to learn is not to give in to that, and to choose, even when it's really difficult, not to allow ourselves to be isolated like that, because when we feel alone is when we start listening to the other voices, okay? And we really can't afford to do that. I hope I'm saying this quote correctly, but I read this quote from Bill Johnson the other day that says, I can't afford to have a thought about myself that is not his thought about me. And it's very true. We can't afford to let anything else talk about who we are, because it's not truth. So, like I said, I'm going to be sticking this video into a blog post, and in that blog post there is a point. It's on the elbow, because there's other points that you can apply Aroma Life to, but that's the easiest one to use. And so I have a picture of where that point is in the post, and I also mentioned some of the other heart emotions. And one of the things I talk about is that in the summer, when our circulatory system and our heart are energizing and kind of doing their annual cycle of cleaning out, storing up, whatever, that's a really good time to start an exercise program. So if you haven't been doing the baby steps to fitness, this is actually a good time to jump in, even if you haven't done it up to now. I've been a lot more consistent with my fitness routine recently, and it's been helping me a lot. I've had a lot more energy since I bumped up to being consistent with my workouts. And it's been cool because I think that that all goes along with the emotions. We have to look at that connection of all three of those areas, spiritual, as well as physical, and all those things pertaining to our thoughts and emotions. So when you start working out, it can even kind of open up the flow for you to release some emotions that have been stuck. So you could use Aroma Life while you're working out, and who knows what would happen. So check that out and be thinking about the list of emotions, because those are all emotions that this would be a great time of year to start dealing with the heart emotions. And if y'all have any questions,